Fully Cooley Alternative is the third and perhaps final season of the cult classic anime series produced by Production IG and Adult Swim. Alternative neither tries to surpass or emulate the beloved first season of the anime, but instead focuses on telling a coherent slice of life story involving four teenage high school seniors while still retaining some elements familiar to longtime fans. In comparison to the first season of Fully Cooley and the second season, Progressive, this season was a lot slower in terms of pacing. Frantic pacing is something to be expected from this series, but the writers decided to slow things down this season, which is something that I can appreciate. A slower pace allowed us to spend more time with the characters and really get a sense of who they were. Fully Cooley Alternative dedicated an episode to each of its four protagonists, Kana, Hajiri, Mosan, and Pets. Each of these characters is well written and expertly characterized. For example, Kana is eccentric, naive, and overly enthusiastic, while Pets is usually calm, soft-spoken, and often sarcastic. Mosan is a workaholic, and Hijiri is a realist. I'll admit that I wasn't a fan of these characters after watching the first episode, but by the second episode I started to see that my initial assessment of these characters being your typical high school girl archetypes was entirely wrong. The writers have given us a really good, realistic depiction of teenage girls that surprisingly doesn't undermine the more fantastical and wacky sci-fi elements of the show. As in every season of Fully Cooley, Haruko and Medical Mechanica play a large role in the overarching storyline. Haruko is still selfish, but is less of a villain in this season than in the previous seasons. The emergence of strange pins and Medical Mechanica plants caused the world around Kana and her friends to change. In typical Fully Cooley fashion, Medical Mechanica robots sent through the NO channel out of Kana's head is used as an allegory for her being on the verge of adulthood. This season typically handles its themes of maturity, acceptance, and love really well, with a few exceptions. There were quite a few times where the dialogue lacked subtlety, most notably in episodes 2 and 4. As I mentioned before, 4 of the 6 episodes were focused on a different girl within the group of friends. The weakest of the 6 episodes, in my opinion, were episodes 1 and 3. Episode 1 was effective at introducing the audience to the girls, but it ultimately felt drab in comparison to the premiere episodes of the past 2 seasons. Episode 3 focused on Mosan and served to flesh out her character for the audience. This episode felt like the equivalent of Progressive's Beach episode, which was ironically the 3rd episode of that season. Similar to that episode, the episode didn't move the overarching story forward, and it ultimately came across like filler. It also didn't help that it ended abruptly. Thankfully, though, there was a payoff to that episode later on in the season. The other episodes were great, and I enjoyed nearly every minute of them. Episode 2 focused on Hijiri and the theme of maturity. I absolutely love this depiction of a typical high school girl dating an older guy. The references made to Michael Bay and the Transformers were a nice touch, and the action toward the end of the episode was very fun to watch. Episodes 4 and 5 were my favorite, and I'd argue the strongest out of the 6 episodes. Episode 4 focused on Kana and her crush on the assistant to the basketball team. Although one could argue that this episode is a retread of the themes explored in episode 2, it's the animation and Kana's struggle with her emotions that really elevated this episode. Throughout the episode, the facial expressions of characters are quite exaggerated, and in one particular scene, the body structure of Haruko is elongated. The animation and drawing in this episode was definitely a standout, and complemented the pure goofiness of the characters throughout the episode. Episode 5 centered on Pets and Kana's revelation that she didn't really know her. This episode addressed Kana's character flaw and featured a great scene where Pets goes off on Kana and references the events of the other episodes. The final episode of this season will likely have fans split on this season for years. Episode 6 wrapped up Kana's character arc nicely and provided some great visuals during the final act. However, I felt that the resolution was reached a bit too quickly and that we could have used a little more time for the finale. Overall, Fully Cooley Alternative is another great installment in the series that manages to retain the spirit of the show without needlessly catering to fan nostalgia or adhering to a certain template. The writers and animators didn't feel the need to get experimental when it came to storytelling or animation, as was the case with the first season and the latter half of Progressive. It's clear that the intent here was to tell a more straightforward story. This season included the same level of top-notch voice acting performances and music by the Pillows in which fans have come to expect. There really isn't much to hate about this season unless you came in expecting it to be exactly like the original series. Like the season's main protagonist Kana, if you're willing to accept change, you might actually enjoy this season. I'm going to give Fully Cooley Alternative an 8 out of 10. For a more in-depth discussion on this season's episodes, go to my review playlist. Thanks for watching, like the video, and subscribe, and let me know what you guys thought about this season of Fully Cooley. Thank you guys for watching. I'm out of here. Peace.